Okay, so I have a lot to talk about for this video. If you've seen my recent live streams, I'm actually really stressed. What? DJ's a suck. That is nowhere near my answer. I don't see it. I don't see any of these rules right now. I'm just gonna have to guess through them again. I have been revising for an exam known as the UCAT, also known as the University Clinical Aptitude Test. The amount of times I've tried to say that and gotten it wrong, I've actually managed to say it all at once this time. But yeah, the University Clinical Aptitude Test, also known as the UCAT, is, as it says, an aptitude test, and it's a test that you have to take as a student if you want to apply to medicine or dentistry to specific UCAT medical schools. So for example, I'll give you a few universities here as an example of what kind of universities that expect a UCAT score from you, and this score is very much dependent on whether or not you get an interview in a lot of universities, so it can be a big deal. Now, my UCAT experience, as you can tell, this has been quite a journey with lots of live streams, lots of stress, lots of really good scores, and even more horrible, horrid scores. I'm just going to not keep you waiting at the moment. I had my UCAT exam a few days ago. I'm done with it now. I don't need to stress about UCAT anymore. And if you want to know what I got for my UCAT exam, here are my grades. So in total, I got 2,820, which as a score is amazing. I am so happy that I got such a good score, and it's a score that's keeping most of my options open, and so I can pretty much apply to the universities I want to with ease that the UCAT isn't going to let me down. So that is one thing that I'm really glad about. I got 2,820 band 1. Only thing is, the exam itself was quite a shock, and a lot of things went wrong in this exam. As you can tell from my verbal reasoning score, 590 was a shocker. Even in the exam, I knew I was not going to get a good score in it. The rest of the exam became a rescue mission, and as you can see with my QR score, it really became a rescue mission, and I had to rescue my score, and I ended up doing so. That is what I got in my UCAT exam. If that's all you're here for, that's my exam. But now I want to go over what the process felt like, and just overall any tips I might have about how to approach this exam and things that I would recommend doing if you're new to this and you need some sort of advice. This exam was not like anything I've ever done, and it was a difficult exam, not because of the stuff itself in the exam, but the way I had to approach this exam. Now, if you don't know already how the exam works, make sure to familiarize yourself. But the difficult part about this exam is the fact that you can't really see a proper improvement. You can't learn information and then apply it into a test and do well. That's not how this exam works. You just do practice and practice until you hopefully see some sort of improvement. And there was a really common graph that I was getting in terms of my overall improvement, and it really reflected my mental health in this period as well. So at the beginning, everything was new, everything was fun. It was a new experience, it was a new test, a new layout. It was nice to do something different after spending so many weeks on my end of years. This was like a small chill thing I'd do each day, and it wasn't that much. I'd do max an hour on this, and I'd just watch a few videos and people explaining how the section worked and do a few practice questions. Not a big deal at all. Then I started practicing a bit more, and this is when I started realizing that I needed a lot of practice to do well in this section. This overall exam was going to require a lot of practice from me, and I just knew from the very beginning that I would have to actually properly put some work into this exam in order to get a good result at the end. But the problem is that had a few downfalls in itself. I would work a lot for this exam and do lots of practice and everything, right? But then there would be this peak at the beginning. I would actually see that the work I'm putting in is actually paying off, and that's always great. But then it comes into a really weird downfall where the more work I do, the less I do well. And then from then on, the more and more I try and improve my scores, the worse and worse they get. And this happened to me so many times. I think about 4 or 5 times in the total revision that I've done, right? Where for a few days I would just not be seeing any improvements. It would be the other way around. I would just be getting worse and worse, and I'd be really thinking what all of my revision was for, because I have not improved a tiny bit. But overall, the whole revision process, there was a clear increase in my grades. But individually, I had these bursts of doing really well and these bursts of not knowing what is going on and fully just going, I hate this exam. To be honest, from the very beginning, this exam was a pain, and I just genuinely don't understand how they expect us to do so much in one exam in such little time. The timing is so bad for this exam. I still don't understand it at all, but I'm finally out of the exam. Let me talk about the exam bit by bit and just tell you how it felt. Now, at the beginning, I didn't do much revision, obviously, but when it came to the last couple of weeks until my exam, I still had a lot of improvement that was needed, and my overall target was to get around 2,800, 2,900, and this was something I kept on saying in my streams as well, that if I got a score around that, I would be happy and that would be great. I wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore. The thing is though, during the streams, I would not be hitting this score, and during my own practice revision, I would not be hitting the score. I did not hit the score once. In my entirety of the revision, I did not hit 2,800 once. It got to me. It was annoying that I kept on doing so badly. From someone who, I would like to say that if I put in work into something, and I'm usually someone who puts a lot of work into things I want to do well in, I almost instantly see some sort of improvement. Or even if I don't see it instantly, I know that it's gonna come. With this exam, I couldn't guarantee anything. And when I sat in the exam, so the day before the exam, I put so much work into it. But then on the day of the exam, I realized that all I needed to do was make sure that my mind was in a state of focus and that I wouldn't get trailed off during the exam, because every second was priceless, and I needed to make sure that I couldn't stress for any of the seconds because it would heavily waste time. So I had to make sure that on the day I would wake up feeling fully refreshed, and I felt really great about the day and just to be in a really good mood, and it really worked. I managed to make sure that I was well rested and I had a good breakfast and all of that. It was very useful. It helped me a lot. When I went to a test center, I felt great. I knew that whatever I got in the score, at the end of the day, it's not going to matter. So many things I could do if I didn't get a good score. So overall, it wasn't that big of a deal. Now, I came into the test center, obviously terrified, but at the same time, I had this sense of confidence because the couple of days right before the exam, I saw something that I hadn't seen at all in this entire revision session. It was this sense of confidence that caused me to do really well in my practice sessions. 36 out of 50. Hopefully we see all greens. Yes, let's go. I was getting really good scores near the end, and it was surprising. I went from getting 500, 600 consistently and just not getting anything above that to suddenly getting 700s, 800 sometimes across the board. And I was confused and I didn't know what was happening. But then when I came into the exam, I made sure to keep that mindset and to hopefully reflect that mindset into the exam itself. Now, speaking about the exam, so let's start with verbal reasoning. If you want to know about how the exam works and like the stuff that happens before an exam, I'll link down a video. It's pretty much exactly the same process as that, so you don't need to worry about any of that stuff. Once I did all like the ID and everything, right, and I came into my like cubicle to do my exam, I was like trying to calm myself down. I sat there for like 10 minutes or so just trying to regain that confidence and make sure that I could just sit this exam just as if it was another mock, and to make sure that it didn't feel too stressful. So I sat down, I started the verbal reasoning section. The beginning of the verbal reasoning section was really good and I wasn't seeing any difficulty. The only problem I had was all the texts were just long, and a lot of people had told me that the verbal reasoning section, the real thing, was significantly shorter than the Medify ones. This for some reason was not the case for me, or it just didn't feel like the case for me, and every text I was doing was just huge, and I just was like, I don't have time to read all of this, and all the texts I was doing were on topics that I just wasn't very much interested in. I kept on getting biographies on people and it was just annoying. I know that I don't do well on those kind of questions, but I kept my cool and I was like, it's fine, I can still do well on these questions, and I felt like I was getting a lot of them right. If we come to near the end of the verbal reasoning section, the timing really got to me and I started guessing loads of the answers, and this hadn't happened to me in a few mocks that I did the days before. Everything was really controlled, but for some reason the timing just went completely off limits and I had to start guessing random answers, and then I was done with the section before I can even guess the last answer. So I already felt shaken after that exam. I was physically shaking after that, and I was like, okay, I need to calm myself down. I've got 4 more other sections to go to redeem myself. I need to forget about VR now. That is the last time I'm going to be doing VR in ages probably, and so I can just forget about that. After VR came DM, and DM is usually my strongest section, and it's a section that I just love doing, but the questions were significantly different to what I was used to, and they were significantly harder, and I hadn't really been told this. The syllogism, so the yes-no questions, they were very long and wordy for most of it, and most of it made no sense. in terms of like, you know how there's lots of questions that don't make sense, right? Those are fine. This one, I'm trying not to give anything away about the questions themselves, but they were really difficult to interpret, and it was so wordy that I couldn't like process the information that was going on. So it really got to me. And then I came to the logical puzzle, which usually I can just get every single time really quickly because I got so used to doing those. They were really, really long, and I just didn't have the time to do them. I looked at some of them and they were just really complicated and much longer than anything I'd done before. Some of them were basic and I could do, but then some of them weren't. And then the argument questions were also really long for some reason. I don't know what it is with all these questions and being super wordy. I don't know if I was unlucky or something, but it was just really annoying. Then the Venn diagram and the probability questions came, and those were really nice, and that kind of gave me a bit of confidence towards that DM section. But overall, DM was just as bad in my head as VR, if not worse. And so I was already in this really, really bad state after those 2 exams, and then knowing that I had QR next to really save the exam, I knew I had to put everything into this one section. And I'm not even kidding, I don't know what happened to me in that section, but I fully went into this state of focus where I just made sure that every question, I didn't waste a single second. I would get the answer, move on, and continue going and not think for 1 second, because I had to make sure that I was getting the answers and moving on, because this was one section I don't even think I once managed to do in the time limit, but for some reason, I don't know what happened in the exam, I managed to complete it in time with a minute to spare, and I still had time to go over some of the questions I had flagged. And I felt so confident with the section that I went from the state of being like completely shaken and going, I don't know what to do with this exam anymore, it's in the bin, to actually having some sort of focus and actually being somewhat happy that I might actually do well in this exam for once. And then AR came along, abstract reasoning. It was actually really, really good, and I think that it felt better than all the other sections, but somehow I didn't do as well in it as I thought I would. I genuinely felt like I got nearly all of the questions right, but I think I missed a lot of second rules or something, I don't know. Overall, those last 2 sections went really, really well, and it really helped me not losing my focus. And when I came to SJT, situational judgment, it was just a nice, relaxing, just a few couple of questions here and there. I had so much time to spare that I really wanted to just end it and just move on, but I made sure to go over my answers to make sure that they were all exactly what I wanted them to be. But overall, it didn't feel as difficult as the Medify ones. I found it easier than the Medify ones actually, and so I was pretty confident I was going to get either a band 1 or a band 2 in it, because most of the questions were really straightforward things. And then I came out of the exam, I saw my score, and I was really, really happy at the 2,820, as I should be. It was a really good score. It was the most I'd ever gotten before. But the only one thing that really kept to me from then until now is the 590 in VR. And I mean, I can't fix it now, and it doesn't affect anything at the moment, so I'm gonna just stay happy about it. I don't care about VR anymore, but this section has fully actually made me insane. I hate verbal reasoning so much, and I thought I got it in the bag, and for some reason it just twisted out of control and just decided to do its own thing. But it's fine. Overall, it wasn't the nicest of UCAT experiences. I think I got done dirty with a lot of text and a lot of questions, but I think I managed to persevere through QR and really save the entire thing. But the entire test, as I said before, really felt like a rescue mission, and me just frantically trying to make sure that I got at least a decent score. Exams don't usually make me stress as much as this exam, because exams usually you can see your progress and you can see your improvement. With this exam, you cannot. You could go into this exam with so much revision and all of that could go down the drain, or it could be the other way around, that you did absolutely nothing but somehow something happened in the exam and you managed to do so well. QR was not one of my stronger sections before the exam, but for some reason it ended up being one of my strongest. VR actually near the end became one of the stronger ones, but it just went all the way back down to the very beginning, even worse than I had originally done on VR. I don't know what happened, and I no longer care about what happened. I am done with this exam and I don't need to worry anymore. Honestly, if you have this exam, don't stress, because this exam isn't the end of the world, but at the same time, please make sure you get your revision in for this exam. Make sure your timing is on point. You need to make sure that this exam doesn't make you forget how to manage your time, because you really need to be on focus with that time management. And that's all I can really say about the UCAT experience itself. Let me just move on to a few specific tips. Okay, so I don't think I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about tips with you guys. If you guys want UCAT specific advice and tips, I will gladly make an entire video on the different sections. If you want a video on them, let me know in the comments below. If you want any sort of specific advice, let me know down below as well. But let me just go section by section, just give you one main tip for each of them. Starting off with VR, obviously I can't really say much for VR. I genuinely think that my experience in the exam was a bit unluckier than usual. But overall, I think the main aspect of VR is that time management. Make sure that every single time you're doing VR, you're doing it timed. But at the same time, prioritize that accuracy over the timing at the very beginning especially. But even towards the end, make sure that your accuracy isn't lacking. Your number one thing has to always be the timing. You need to make sure that you can get that timing down. That's my number one tip for VR. Obviously, I can't really say much about VR. I got 590. Don't take advice from me from VR. So let's just move on to DM. DM 700 was a great score considering how the exam felt when I was actually doing it. I don't understand how I got 700 and what questions led me to get 700, but one thing I definitely do know is that the Venn diagram questions and the probability questions are almost always very repetitive, and you need to make sure that you got every single one of those done properly and make sure that you don't run out of time for those, because they're the freest marks in the entire exam, full stop. They're so easy to get, especially those probability questions. A lot of them are basic GCSE maths probability, which at first might be a bit difficult, but once you get used to the way they ask the questions, it's the same thing every single time. Even the argument questions can be very easy to solve, and if you have that main idea of making sure you negate any of the ones that make assumptions, you can really get your options down to at least 2 every single time, and that way you can literally just give yourself a 50-50 every single time and just greatly increase your chances. So it's always really important to be able to rule out any options that are clearly incorrect and to guess between those if you are unsure. Okay, with QR 840, what can I say? My main tip for QR is to not skip too many questions, which I know sounds a bit strange because considering what most people say is to skip ruthlessly, and I do agree with that. But one thing that specifically I realized was that sometimes I'd look at a question, right, a question stem, and I'd be like, it looks confusing, and I would just instantly skip without even trying to get what the question could be asking. So I think it's really important to at least make sure that you could try and answer that question and see if you could do it. Dedicate most of your time towards the questions with multiple parts, right? So the ones with one table but 5 separate questions on that one table. So every single time you start a new question, see if it's a standalone question or not. If it's a standalone question, usually it wastes more of your time than you actually earn from doing that question. So it's better to prioritize your time towards those 4 or 5 questions for one piece of data. So for example, if it's a pie chart and it's got 5 questions on it, easy 5 marks, you can do all of those. Dedicate your time to those and make sure you get those right. Usually they have like a few tricks and stuff, so make sure you're reading everything really carefully. And worst comes to worst, if you don't know what the answer is, sometimes you can use the question to try and figure out an answer. So for example, if the question says something about 50% off, so you have to deduct 50% at the end of your answer or something, look at all your answers and see if there's one that's not deducted 50%, and then work your way backwards and try and get the answer without actually doing any working out. And this actually works a lot. There's a lot of answer options that try and pick people out for not doing the full equation properly, but you can also use those answer options to try and quickly get to a part of the equation without actually doing the working out for it. So it can really help as well. And you get more and more used to being able to guess these type of questions the more practice you do. But I think overall, just being able to understand when you can do a question, when you can't do a question is the most important thing in QR. Now, AR, I think I have a lot to say about AR. Honestly, the biggest thing I can say for AR is to do as many practice questions as you can. There is a point with AR, right, where you begin not knowing any of the rules, and each time you think you're going to do well, you just do appalling and you just don't know how to improve. You just keep on not knowing any of the rules and guessing. But there's this weird flip that happens really late and you just suddenly start doing extremely well and you don't even know how it's happening. And a lot of the times it still feels like you're guessing most of the answers, but you still do really well. And the way to get this flip is to simply practice as much as you can. After you've done enough practice, you just automatically get used to so many rules and you can recognize them so quickly that it takes you half a second to do each question at that point. And you need all those seconds in AR. I mean, everyone knows how bad the timing is for AR, so you really need to make sure that you can get through a section as quickly as possible. And to do that, you need to be able to identify the rule as quickly as possible. And to do that, you need to be able to do as much practice for it. And so one thing I really recommend you guys doing is to make a document where each time you don't know a rule, to add that rule to a document and to just build up that document over time. And you can then start seeing patterns and consistent rules that you keep on missing. So for example, one of my common ones that I kept on forgetting to check for is symmetry, and it ended up being one of my strongest at the end because of the amount of times I got it in my document, that I just became so alert of symmetry that I just never went off the radar, and I always managed to pick up on symmetry after that. So highly recommend that. That's a really useful tip as well. And then SAT, I think a lot of the scenarios that you get are really similar, and most of the time it's the same thing over and over again. You always get the same confidentiality breaches, you get the same co-workers arguing about a group project, you get used to the same things over and over again. So for example, patient safety always being number one, that's always important. Also the fact that hospital policy is always number one, or university policy, the policies are always at the top no matter what, and it's just stuff that you pick up over time the more and more practice you do. And especially at the start, it feels like you're guessing half of the questions and you just end up getting band 1 sometimes and band 4 the other times. It's just really weird, but near the end, trust me, it does get better. And honestly, I think SJT and the real thing is much easier than the mocks, so you don't need to worry as much about SJT as people really say you do. It's not that difficult. As long as you make sure that you don't tell John about the patient you saw last week in the cafe, then that's all you need to worry about. Band 1 instantly. Okay, so I hope that if you're doing this exam soon, that this hopefully helped you get a bit of an insight in terms of how the exam is laid out and how it works, and hopefully a few tips as well. Hopefully you do well in your exam, because it's such a stressful exam. I really feel for anyone who's going through this exam process. It's not nice. It's genuinely one of the most difficult things I've done so far in terms of my academic journey, and I didn't expect it to be so difficult, but it just ended up taking up so much of my time, especially in a time when I was already drained from lots of revision over year 12, and finally being over with that end of year work to then get straight into the mess of UCAT revision and just university stuff. It's a lot. It's honestly so much work, and it's just, you don't see a break sometimes, and it's really difficult to be able to just calm down and relax and just pause. This exam has genuinely sent me into this fluctuating mess sometimes, and sometimes I'd be over the moon with enjoyment because I'd be actually finally getting some sort of improvement, and other times I would be low in terms of self-esteem because I did hours and hours on end of practice and I would not see a single bit of improvement. So genuinely, I just want to say best of luck to anyone who's going through this exam, and best of luck to anyone who is doing the exam very soon. And if you have done your exam and you didn't get what you wanted to get, honestly, it's okay. There's still lots of options out there, and you also need to realize you've got the BMAT exam too if you're planning on doing that, and that means that you've got multiple options, so you don't need to worry as much. I honestly think that the BMAT exam shouldn't be as bad because it's more academic based, but I haven't looked at the exam yet and I don't know how it works, so I might retract my statement later on, who knows. For now, I think that nothing can be worse than this exam. Honestly, now thinking about A-levels, I think that A-levels are the easiest thing in the world, and the UCAT exam isn't even difficult. It's taken up so much of my energy that A-levels just seem like a joke now. I just wish to go back to A-levels because I actually enjoyed A-levels. UCAT revision was not enjoyable, especially near the end, but A-level revision I actually enjoy doing because it's on stuff that I enjoy learning about. So that's something I guess that I can look forward to in year 13. But I'm done with this exam. I don't need to worry about this exam anymore. Hopefully this video gave you an insight on my experience, and as you can tell, this exam was not a good one, but it went well overall. Like, I'm really happy about my 2,820. It's a really great score. So overall, I think the revision was worth it, and that's all I've got to say. So best of luck to anyone who's doing this exam or any sort of exams. A lot of you guys have results day very soon, so best of luck for that. Honestly, if you don't get the scores you want, don't stress, please. Don't worry too much about results day. Just make sure that as long as you can go forward with what you want to do, it's fine. Don't set yourself too high expectations. And apart from that, I don't really have anything else to say. So thanks guys for watching this video from the beginning to the very end now. Even if you skipped around this video, I don't mind. As long as you're here to the end, I very much appreciate every single one of you guys watching. Hopefully I can upload a bit more later on because now I have a bit of free time. Now that this exam is finally over and I can relax a bit. What the thing is though, I've now got a personal statement and stuff, so it's a bit like I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. There's so much stuff, it's annoying. But yeah, best of luck for anyone doing whatever exams or having any sort of results, and I'll see you guys very soon, I hope. So yeah, bye for now.